Most of you know that I come from a very religious family tradition. My father is a retired pastor. My sister is a retired pastor. My uncle of blessed memory was a retired pastor. At one point, my cousin was a pastor. Indeed, myself, I got out of the Navy to go to seminary to become a pastor. True. I don't like to talk about it much. I consider that to be the 7 worst years of my life, but, you know, in retrospect, things happen for a reason, I guess, as so many people say. I wasn't really called to be a pastor. It wasn't what I was made to do. I mean, it wasn't what I was created to do. It wasn't something that I should have been doing. And hindsight and retrospect allows me to see that, but other people don't necessarily, particularly in our faith tradition that I grew up in, don't necessarily see it that way. They have a much different viewpoint of that sort of thing. At any rate, I like the study of theology. It's something that I very much enjoy. It's something that I consider myself to have a good working knowledge of, particularly those areas which I have been a part of. Wesleyan Arminian Christianity, specifically the Salvation Army, and later Judaism, which I converted to in 2007. It was a long process. It was basically, if I had to count the years, at least a 20-year process, probably closer to 30-year process to convert myself in faith from Christianity to Judaism completely. There were some things I tried along the way that seemed like a hybrid, that seemed like, you know, this will fill in the missing parts, but they didn't work. And it was a fascinating experience, and one that I don't require anyone else to go through. In fact, oftentimes I question why in the world I had to go through this. But obviously the answer is because that's what's going to get me where I need to be. So it is this knowledge, this theological experience that I have that leads me to look at things sometimes with great questioning. I mean, that's part of what I do. I ask questions about things, and this election of 2020 had me concerned about a lot of things before the election, things that have now become even more of a problem, in my opinion. But before the election, I had conversations with Rodbo. I had conversations with Bill Mick about this. I was deeply concerned about the mentality of people, and I guess in some ways it was even more than just religion. It was just faith across the board. But there were a lot of people, and for some reason, most of the obvious ones, seemed to be on the political right, who seemed to take the attitude of, I have ordered God to do this, and God's going to answer my prayers that Donald Trump be reelected. And I remember the conversation with Rod and Bill about what are these people going to do if, at the time, if God doesn't do as he's been directed by these people. What's going to happen then? It's a question that I've had for a long time. It really is. I've always been fascinated by people who order God around, and then when he doesn't do what they've asked him to do or told him to do, it doesn't seem to affect their faith in any way. I mean, realistically speaking, you would think that if I said to you, do this thing, and you didn't do that, I wouldn't have a whole lot of faith in the next time. But there seems to be some rationalization process that I'm not capable of wrapping my mind around. I'm still studying it. I'm still trying to learn about it. But it's a fascinating thing to me. I mean, you've watched what's happened since the election, and I don't know about you, but for me, prior to this, I have lots of friends who are still Christians and still very religious and still posting on Facebook prior to the election about how God was going to answer their prayers. Praise be to God, he is going to reelect Donald Trump. 4 years ago, these were the same people who were saying, well, God uses imperfect people. We know Donald Trump isn't really our kind of Christian. He doesn't mean what we would want him to be, but God's going to use him anyway. Maybe that's so. But then again, it's possible that God doesn't care. I mean, do you really believe that crossing yourself before a free throw or a field goal attempt, or when a football game is over saying, I want to give all the credit to Jesus, really means anything? Do you really think that Jesus cares about whether or not the university of whatever you go to defeated the other university in a football game? Is this what we're really expecting of the deity, the creator of time and space? You see why I have problems with this? In some cases, the reaction on the religious right has been, well, ludicrous. Kenneth Copeland. Now, let me say this. Let me back up just a minute. I know that Kenneth Copeland is a Looney Tune. I get it. I get that most Christians look at him with barely disguised disdain and recognize him for what he is. The problem is that he's representative of too much of Christianity, and to even a lesser degree to what you would call normal Christianity. He still represents that same type of belief style that, God's going to give us what we want, and if we didn't do it, it's just because we didn't have the faith of a mustard seed. Well, really? How many mountains have you actually physically moved? I'll wait. Copeland, and if you haven't seen the tape of this, you should go watch the tape. Copeland stands at his platform there on his bema and he says, media says that Biden is the president. Sorry, I forgot to capitalize Biden for those of you looking at the video. That's a typo. And then he proceeds to fake laugh. And the weird part is the congregation does the same thing. They fake laugh at his statement that the media says that Biden is the president. Look, I get it. I understand how the legal process works. I understand all of that. Believe me, I understand all of that. But for people who live their entire lives and their entire industry on the whole name it, claim it BS, are we now actually moving in an area where if we say it ain't so, it ain't so? I mean, this is the same man who said, COVID, I blow you away. You will not come back. And then turned around 3 weeks later and commanded, I don't know who he was commanding. He commanded that there be a vaccine. Well, aren't you just sort of admitting that your original position there of blowing away COVID didn't work? And nobody puts two and two together and goes, this guy's a lunatic and we shouldn't be listening to him and we certainly shouldn't be sending him any money. But we do it anyway. That's the part I don't get. That's the part that confuses me. That's the part that makes me worry about what people like this are going to do when the deity doesn't behave as they have commanded the deity to do, him to do. And don't send me any emails about the deity being him, because he just is. Deal with it. If you don't like it, then there's plenty of faiths out there that will teach you that the deity is female or nothing or whatever. But in my world, God is male. Don't like it? Too bad. I don't care. Along the rest of my walk of faith, though, I have learned a lot of things. Many of them, I don't want to say counter to things I was raised with, but certainly clarifying things that I was raised with. Is that a good enough term? Looking at things differently. I'll tell you a little story. In 1997, I was blessed. I got to go to Israel. I got to go to the Holy Land. And for me, it was a life-changing experience. As someone said to me, you cannot go to Israel and come back the same person. You can't. Now, they meant that from a very Christian standpoint. And while I agree with the statement, I certainly didn't come back a better Christian. I came back more convinced than ever that I needed to be somewhere else. But there was a moment on that trip where you are driving from Jerusalem down to Jericho. That sound familiar to you Christians? There was a road and a man traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho. Now the road is, I don't want to say it's narrow, but my bed is wider than that road was. And you're on this tour bus going down this thing. On the one hand side, depending what side of the bus you're sitting on, is this cliff, almost straight uphill cliff almost. And on the other side is this drop off into the wadi, 1,000 feet down. If you fall down it, you're going to die. I mean, it's really that simple. And of course, you stop at the halfway point because this is the point where the parable of the Good Samaritan is supposed to take place. And you're kind of wandering around buying the souvenirs from the local merchants there. And maybe, I don't remember, but there may have been a devotional or something. But I was standing over as close to the edge as I could get without, I was much braver in those days, without falling off. And I was just standing there looking at the other side of the canyon. Not cliff, not river, canyon on the other side, a good mile and a half away. And on the other side is a monastery built into the side of the hill, much like Mesa Verde down in California, or Colorado, sorry. And of course, there's a road on that side. I was just looking at it, standing there, minding my own business, and a good friend of mine walked up and says, "So, Dave, what are you thinking?" And I looked at him and I said, and he passed by on the other side. And my friend, Dean, who was one of the tour leaders, had been there many times, looked at me and said, "That's why we bring you here." Because all of a sudden, your perspective changes on things, and you see things not the way you've been taught them your whole life, not with the biases and the imprints that you've already had, but with what you're really seeing. It wasn't that the Good Samaritan, the parable of the Good Samaritan, it wasn't that the three guys, whatever they are, it's been a long time, went around the guy on the road. They went all the way back to Jerusalem and crossed over on the other side. Do you understand the implication of what the parable was trying to tell people in a very rabbinical way? Judaism for me has changed how I view things that I viewed a certain way all my life. Whether that was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or whether it was the parable of the Good Samaritan, didn't really matter. The impact that those things had shifted when I began to look at them from a different angle, I guess, and a much more fulfilling angle for me. One of the things that concerns me today about religiosity and politics is this absolutism. God will listen to me because we are the true believers. Well, what if he doesn't? Anybody? Bueller? Anybody have a response? I know some of you do, and good on you. But what I see being presented isn't your response, and I guarantee you that if you have a cogent response to that, you're probably in the minority. I know, because I see it from people every day. But here's the problem. It's easy to pray for a government and a president and leaders when you like them, when you believe that God has ordained them. It's easy then. These are the people God put over us. We should pray for them. It's easy to do that then. If they believe the same thing you do, then good on, man, you're fine with that. But when they're from the other side of things, are you as anxious to do it then? I submit to you that most people are not. Most people are more like Copeland, and they want to laugh. I'm serious. You should go watch this video. If you want to be both enthralled and appalled at the same time, you should go watch that. Especially if you're someone like me who has a lot of questions about faith and those sorts of things. It is remarkable to me that in my walk in Judaism, the things that I have learned that have challenged my political beliefs. I'm a conservative, still a conservative. I will always be a conservative. I'm an originalist when it comes to constitutional interpretation. I will always be an originalist. That doesn't mean that those beliefs can't be challenged. It doesn't mean that I have 100% completely and absolutely considered every angle and aspect of it. Wonderful thing about Judaism is, you know what they say, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. We have books. I have some of them over there. Volumes upon volumes of books where Jews have been arguing for centuries about the most minute of things, seemingly. The remarkable thing is that they may seem trivial on the surface, but somehow or another they seem to always become important. The book of Jeremiah, the prophet says, "Seek the welfare of the city to which I have exiled you, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. For in its prosperity you shall prosper." Jeremiah, of course, writing to the Jews who have been exiled, Babylon and other places. And he's reminding them that, again, if you really believe that God chooses all leaders, well, then guess what? Even these crappy leaders that don't seem to like you, that don't seem to want you around, are dependent upon your spiritual support. The Ethics of the Fathers, which is a commentary book, part of the Talmud, pray for the welfare of the government. For were it not for the fear it inspires, every man would swallow his neighbor alive. Thomas Hobbes would later synthesize that into this idea that without government, life would be nasty, brutish, and short. It is a concept that I think sometimes, and I think people like Copeland and his ilk don't understand. They're like people who send texts to their wife saying, "You can't divorce me because wives have to be submissive to their husbands. That's what it says in the Bible." It also says a few other things. You didn't read those parts, did you? People who say Donald Trump is a Nazi, but fail to show that he's murdered millions of people. Well, if you're not going to look at the whole picture, what good is it? There's a reason why there's a whole Bible, not just, bits and pieces and verses that apply the way you want them to be applied. There's a reason for that. It is important and incumbent on us as people of faith to understand that God has said that we're supposed to do this. And laughter aside, doesn't change that. Kenneth Copeland can no more command God to do anything than he can command me to do anything. He's a failure at that. Nothing that he's prophesied has come true. Not one thing. And while he might be the extreme, while he might be the really far out there guy, there are a hell of a lot of people sending him money. And there's a whole lot of people that act the same way. I know, because I see your posts on Facebook. God's gonna make Donald Trump the president again. Did you know that? No, sorry, I don't know that. What I do know is that whoever the president is, we have been commanded by God, see, that's the way it works, to lift them up in our prayers so that he will prosper and we will prosper. That's not my idea. It's not my words. Take it up with the guy that wrote the book of Jeremiah, because he's the one that said it. In my walk in Judaism, I've learned that there are a lot of things like that I wasn't necessarily raised that way. And maybe there are things that I don't like thinking about. But in reality, there are things that I have to do. Or else I'm not really Jewish, am I? Or by extension, I'm not really Christian if I'm not doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing, am I? It's interesting to me because there's actually a drash that explains why I can't be a libertarian. Why I can't be a member of the Libertarian Party. There's no way I can be a libertarian and Jewish. They don't mesh. They have opposite views of things. Putting that aside, in synagogues all around the world tonight, it's tonight, isn't it? Friday. It's gone. In synagogues all around the world tonight and tomorrow morning, there will be a prayer. It's part of our Siddur, particularly in conservative synagogues. I suspect that more Reform synagogues might skip it, but in conservative synagogues, the prayer will be offered. Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessings upon this land, upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials, who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them understand the rules of justice you have decreed so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. Amen.